Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I've got a guest on with Mark, and I'm not even going to attempt to do his second name. He's going to tell me in a second how to do that.
Yep.
But he's joining us from Charleston in the United States of America, which is, I've discovered, on the East Coast and just slightly north of Florida. For those that have been to Disneyland or Disney World, I can't remember which one it was. That's where most UK people would have been. That'll be the reference point. Most people in the UK. And Mark's going to discuss with us about his life and a book he's just produced on well-being issues around well-being, and we'll get to know more about that. And As you know, folks, this is a pre-record, so don't call me during the show while you're watching it because I'll probably be doing something else and might get grumpy with you. But do send me messages on WhatsApp 07506 319 745. That's enough from me. So, Mark, first of all, how do I say your second name?
It's Reinisch.
Reinisch.
Reinisch. And don't worry about mispronouncing it. I even mispronounce it sometimes. It's a hard one. So
I've reached that stage in my life where I forget who I am these days. So I
I'm
need
with.
I need the name written on there so I can know who am I? Yeah, there we go.
You.
Rheinish, where does that come from culturally? What's the background of that name?
Germany, Austria, that region.
Okay, and where your family from there, and then when did they come over to the US?
Primarily on my father's side, they're from that region, and they came over at the turn of the century, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then there was a number of them came over the next few decades,
Yeah.
and then the other side of the family from Poland,
Right.
Scotland, so a little bit of a number of areas,
Nice. Melting.
mostly European.
But lots of the people, I guess, don't know this about the US, but there's very large German communities in the US, and that caused some issues during World War II, for example. There was like there were some issues that came up, like on the West Coast. There were Japanese communities, and that brought up some issues then. But sort of, do you feel German? I mean, you're obviously American. Everybody is American something in the US. Do you hold on to a German culture, or are you much more of into the US culture?
More into the U.S. culture. I'm definitely aware of my heritage, certainly take pride in it. And I'm sure it has influenced my mindset in some ways and all that. But definitely, we've been in America for generations, so we've adapted.
It's interesting when I talk to Americans that have Irish connection, they still seem to be much more Irish than me.
Yeah, yeah, certainly.
And different communities have different relationships to their personal history. Was that a decision your family made to be integrated much more, do you think, or was it just happened and no big deal?
There's definitely some backstory there. So, for instance, when the first Reinishes from our family tree came over, it was actually, it could have been a great great grandfather. He was going on a skiing trip,
Mhm.
and his father owned a factory, and so they got, it could have been a couple $1,000s to go on a trip and a honeymoon. But he took that money and came over to America, and the family kind of disowned him because of
That's
that.
right. Running away
Right.
with the fortune, quite.
Yep. But some of those assets stayed with the family, and then interestingly, during World War II, when the Nazis had unfortunately taken over
Mm.
Germany, and one of my relatives had received a letter from the Nazi government saying they are taking over these assets, which
Yeah,
could have been factory, could have been,
yeah.
homes and all that. And legend has it in our family that our relative just basically tore up the paper, threw it away because he was done with that, especially because what had happened around World War II.
Yeah, yeah. And you didn't grow up in Charleston, though. You've moved there. Where did you grow up in the US?
Yeah, I started out in Albany, New York.
Okay.
So further up on the East Coast, and lived all throughout what they call upstate New York. So it's well north of New York City,
Yeah.
and ended up graduating from high school from a small farm community called Beekman Town, but just a lovely area, just probably 20 miles south of the Canadian border,
Right.
probably an hour away from Montreal. Just a lovely region, wonderful
Okay.
childhood.
Yeah, I can imagine. When we think of New York, we only ever think of the city, but New York is a quite large state, isn't it? That sort of straddles quite a long distance, really.
Yeah, and to me, the centerpiece is Lake Champlain. If
Wow.
you've never been there, it's a wonder. I think it's maybe the largest freshwater lake, maybe even in the world.
Wow.
But it's just majestic. I love that area, the Adirondack Mountains, Green Mountains, very scenic. I enjoyed it a lot.
It sounds glorious, to be honest. Sounds
It
like a sort of ideal place to grow up as a kid if you're into the outdoors and scenery and so on. Maybe not so ideal when you're a bit older and you get into your teens and you want a bit more action and adventure, or was it okay for you?
Oh, growing up, it was great because you had all the water sports. You could, go across the border to Canada, go on adventures. So it was a great place to grow up. But then what you find as you get older, and you move around a bit, if you do, once I moved down south, to the warmer climate, it softens you. So then you think going back up
I'm not
north,
going back to that winter shit.
you've got to put on a jacket. What is a jacket?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Scrape, all the frost off of the windshields to just drive your car. You become soft.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it'd be tough to go back.
This is the same in the UK. They call us Nesh Southerners up north. So we're in
Yeah.
the south, and they say, "Oh, soft Southerners. You're not used to the hard life
Yeah.
anymore." Fair enough. Same sort of dynamic. Were you an only child? Did you have siblings or?
I had an older brother,
Hmm.
3 years older,
Okay.
and it was a great thing being the youngest child, because what I found is he motivated me to strive beyond my years,
Great.
whether it's in athletics, because I would play sports with him and his friends. They were 3 years older, more physically mature, but it forced me to up my game just to compete.
Great.
Every grade that he ever got in every subject, I was always aware of it because I had to beat him.
Hmm.
And didn't always do that, but it really pushed me to try my best to,
Hmm.
take my potential as far as it could go. So I think it gave me a really good launching pad to some of the things I've tried to do in my life.
Me and my brother were slightly closer in age, but we were quite wild weeds, I have to say. We sort of enjoyed going out and we'd disappear for a day, come back at the end of the day covered in mud and demanding food, and that was it. You never saw us when holidays. And I think that's the way my mum liked it, to be honest. Sort of two smelly boys, go away, come back when you're tired and I'll feed you and
Yeah.
what.
Yeah,
Um,
back in those days, it was what they call the free range parenting,
yeah,
where the children you leave for in the morning, let your parents know roughly when you're going to be back. You
yeah,
may miss it by a couple of hours, and you didn't think twice about it. But when I had two children, I have two daughters who are now have left the nest. When they were growing up, if they simply rode their bike around the block in our development, we were very antsy about it,
yeah.
very uncertain. It's just a different time and age, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the figures don't fit with our fears. So it's really interesting. These
Yeah.
fears of strangers are very much exaggerated in terms of what actually happens. But I guess that's the world we live in, and we're very much connected through our telephones and our apps and all this sort of stuff now. So, and I think maybe people are less forgiving of parents these days. So if something were to happen to your child, you would be judged pretty quickly and pretty severely, I think, and unless you sort of fulfilled other people's expectations. But you had this sort of free range childhood. a brother you were quite close to, very active, healthy. All sounds very healthy. You were okay at school, sort of high school and all that sort of stuff was okay for you. Were you more of a jock or an academic, and which one would you say you were?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I definitely participated in sports.
Yeah,
Took my studies, fairly seriously, involved in, student government and other clubs.
great.
And it was before the age of the internet.
Yeah.
So you pretty much were locked into your area. You didn't really have a good perspective of the
Sure.
larger world. But in that ecosystem, we had a lot of fun and a lot of growth. So very good high school experiences
Sure.
that then led into going to college, an engineering college called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
The acronym is RPI. And I studied management there and ended up graduating. And they were a little bit outside of Albany, New York, where they were located.
Yeah. And you studied, you went into corporate America, and you've had quite a very successful career. Do you want to just sort of give us some of the bullet points in terms of the things that you've done?
Yeah, my career has been interesting because there's basically been two paths. The first path was the standard corporate America. So I started out with General Electric when at the time they were the most admired company in the world. They were led by Jack Welch, the legendary CEO. And I started out in a call center, helping pensioners and employees with their insurance benefits.
Oh.
And from there, I went on to this program called Six Sigma. And
Mhm.
that's a statistically based process improvement approach that businesses use to get underneath business processes and functions to try to figure out the best way to make them better.
Yeah.
So that ended up propelling me down the path where I pretty much spent the remaining 25 years or so of my corporate career and what I'm getting back into now, and that's business transformation.
Yeah.
So it's basically a role where you're partnering with the business leaders and the functions and trying to figure out how do you improve the customer experience, how do you improve profitability, how do you drive revenue, and so on. And I bounced around different companies, different promotional opportunities. So I've worked with Bank of America in financial services. I've worked with software providers in the nonprofit space and have crisscrossed the United States, lived on the West Coast in Washington, which is just north of California, lived in the Midwest, lived
Mhm.
in Florida, and now I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So it's been a diverse career. And,
And along
and
the way, you've managed to get a family together as well, somehow, all of this,
yeah,
wife,
yeah.
your
Um,
kids, and
when I've had a few spare minutes, I did, why not have a family?
yeah, why not?
Um, and I say that jokingly, but really, and I mean this authentically, family is everything to me.
Yeah.
It makes everything worthwhile. So that's always been one red line in my career that I'm not going to put my job over my family. And that's a big part of the book, The Wellness Ethic, that I wrote that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Um, and so I have a wife. We've been married a little over 30 years and two adult children, one in her early 30s, which kind of freaks her out that she has crossed that threshold, and then one who's in her mid 20s. So family has always been very important.
Yeah.
But when I mentioned earlier that my career has taken, some interesting turns, what I've always done in addition to my corporate career is I've always have done side hustles and usually spent anywhere from 15 to 25 hours a week pretty much throughout the year, sometimes full time on vacations, in between, spending time with my family. So it started out for around 20 years, I wrote screenplays,
Yeah.
comedic screenplays. I had such a passion for that. Never sold one or optioned one, I once had an agent. I once won a full scholarship to film school that I declined because I got a corporate promotion,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to take the financial risk. So I did that for 20 years, and then got a life coaching certification. I did that part-time for a year. Then I had this crazy notion that I could build a social media platform to topple Facebook.
Great. Well, somebody
Facebook,
should.
someone should. And what I found is Facebook's preference is not to be toppled.
No, they don't like that idea for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, it surprised me as well.
I'm sure that's quite.
Right. So it was around like a dozen years ago.
Yeah.
And my idea was to have a one-stop social media platform where you could do social posts, but you could also sell things, buy things, do reviews of movies, products,
Yeah.
restaurants, best of list. And this was before there was Facebook Marketplace and other apps. So it really was unique. And imagine doing all that stuff within your network, your trusted network.
Yeah.
That had, kind of a wow factor.
Yeah.
So I ended up bringing a co-founder on board who was a chief technology officer in a company that I worked at. And we bootstrapped it for 4 years, building out the fully functioning social media platform. We loved it. And we ended up selling it. So we had a good exit. It didn't make me the multi millionaire, but it was a good outcome and a wonderful growth experience because I had no background in technology, product management. I didn't even like social media, but I had an idea and I was able to execute it with a lot of support from a lot of people. So that took around 4 years. And then after that, I thought, all right, what's next? Because I love the going after dreams and the fulfillment I was getting from these side hustles. So that's where the idea of writing the book came into fruition. And that ended up being a 6 year journey that brings me to here today. So that's a very quick survey
I'm going
of
to
my
come
background.
back to the writing of the book because I've got another question for you, if that's okay, which is
Oh,
this.
yeah.
What I'm intrigued by is that here you are, a very successful corporate American guy. You've got all that behind you. I mean, what brought you to an interest in specifically men's mental health and addiction, which is where you went with this? Because you don't fit the typical pattern of somebody, if you like, who's interested in this. You're a very successful entrepreneur, businessman, etc. Sort of what then piqued your interest in the idea of men's mental health and addiction recovery?
Yeah, well, I don't get into addiction recovery, but I definitely get into wellness, mental health, and
Yeah,
all that. Basically, two things led me to that in that direction. One is my nature is I view myself as a servant leader, meaning that I love to help people.
so
It makes me happy, makes me feel good. I love being able to make a difference in someone's life.
yeah,
So as I'm doing my corporate career and all the jobs, my favorite part is leading teams and making an impact on each individual person on the team, making them more satisfied in their career, helping them to grow, accomplish great things. That just gives me energy. So that was one driver that naturally led to becoming a life coach
yeah,
and getting a certification, which then led ultimately to writing the book. But there was a second very important piece of this puzzle that led me down this path. And that was if you looked on paper, I truly had and have a wonderful family,
yeah,
loving family. It's my strength. And I had a good career. It
mm,
was paying the bills, and I was accomplishing some good things, had some good career movement. I was healthy. I had every reason to be happy and fulfilled with my life, but I wasn't.
yeah,
I rather than focusing on what I had, I would focus on what I didn't have. I didn't sell a screenplay. That was a negative.
mhm,
I didn't progress to running a company. Well, that was a negative because I let it be. And even my family, rather than being fully grateful for the good fortune of having a wonderful family, I didn't feel it to the level I should have. So I wasn't happy and fulfilled. My mindset was off. So when I got into life coaching, I thought maybe this is going to help me.
Mm,
And it actually it surprised me in that what was most fulfilling wasn't becoming a life coach and that career accomplishment.
mhm.
It was rather applying everything I was learning about mind, body, spirit to my own life and making my own life better. And that began my transformation, that experience. So that's what ultimately led me down this path. But it was in my DNA, even from when I was a
I was
child. You
going to
could trace
say it was clearly because the way you describe yourself during your corporate time as well, sort of your interest in supporting and nurturing your staff and colleagues, and that came from somewhere. It's not if you not, it's not necessarily the typical narrative one comes across from a successful business male. And
right, right.
successful business male in America, and particularly at the moment, because images of men don't involve nurturing in that sense, particularly at the moment. There's a lot of quite negative images of men, and particularly in the US and also in the UK as well, what we might call toxic masculinity. I prefer other terms, but we'll use that term. And yet here you are sort of being concerned about the development of other people. Eventually, you get concerned about your own development, which is
Yeah,
the correct way round to do it, I think. But
right.
you're trying to deal with whatever's going on inside you through other people. But that you genuinely were committed to helping and nurturing other people.
Absolutely. And it's a big reason why I wrote the book as
Yeah.
well, not only to further my own development, but to try to be an antidote to a lot of what is going on that I think
Is
is
it? Right.
going a bit astray. But when I was writing the book, I got into life purpose because that's fundamental to it's a catalyst for a lot of things you do in your life.
I agree.
And when I think about my life purpose, basically I exist to improve people's lives, including my own, through my spirit to serve, creativity, sense of humor, and ability to simplify the complex. Now, that is a mouthful, but when you look at the thread of my professional career, all the side hustles, my devotion to my family, my drive to help people, my compassion, it's all rooted in that life purpose. It all makes perfect sense, even though on the surface, it may seem a little bit different than what you would expect for a male in corporate America, as you described.
Yeah, absolutely. Because corporate America is dog eat dog without a doubt.
It is.
There's no two ways about it. It's a very competitive environment, and unpleasant people rise to the top by being unpleasant. How did you survive by being a pleasant person? How did you
Um,
manage that?
It's interesting.
Yeah,
I've survived in most jobs, but I've suffered through layoffs.
right.
And so I've had disruption. And when I first take over a team that I'm leading, and I'll be doing that very shortly with this new job,
Yeah,
one of the principles that I establish is that our team brand is going to be positive leadership.
yeah,
And what I mean by that is we're here to help people. We're going to be uplifting. We're going to congratulate people. We're going to
yeah,
celebrate
absolutely.
successes.
Yeah,
But that
right
doesn't
too.
mean we're going to be lax and we're
No,
not going to get great things. It doesn't mean we're not going to challenge people and try to help them strive beyond what they thought they were capable of doing.
yeah,
But we're not going to be jerks about it. We're
yeah,
not going to throw people under the bus. We're not going to take credit for things that we didn't do. We're going to truly build positive partnerships. So that's the way I approach life. That's the way I approach business. It's non-negotiable. It's to the core of who I am. So that approach really does work.
yeah.
It
Without a
doesn't
doubt.
have to be
Over here,
either
we call
or.
it attachment based or relationship based management. So, utilizing this thing that we all have as human beings, we can form very complex, supportive, attachments to each other. And also, like I would say from psychology, we understand that work is family. It's the same dynamic. So, like in terms of as a child grows, you have primary, secondary, tertiary attachments, tertiary being your siblings and the sibling group, and then that's school, and then that's work. And
Right.
that's how our relationships. But somehow in work, particularly for men, though that bonding capacity, which is a very successful strategy we have as that is why we rule the planet because of our capacity to form relationships. Somehow for men, that has gotten lost. I think it's coming back. I mean, how did you, when I say survive, I mean, you're obviously very successful, but how did your heart survive in that environment as a guy who wanted to be kind, but would be faced by unkindness at times, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and I think you have to accept the reality as it is, not how you wish it were.
Yeah.
So when I'm at a company and I see layoffs occurring, and I see them sometimes in a very heartless manner,
Yeah.
where you are now notified via an email, if you're even given that courtesy, you may just be
Yeah,
your
it's
badge no
horrific.
longer
Horrific.
work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And I can't directly control that.
Yeah.
Whenever I have influence, I'm going to influence it. Absolutely. I'm going to
Yeah.
challenge on it, but I can't control it.
Yeah.
I focus more on what I can control and my mindset, my attitude in the moment. And when I remind myself of that, when I am getting emotionally worked up, when I see something happening in the world, happening domestically, or in my own life, I've got to pull myself back and say, Mark, you can't control this. And
Yeah.
that will help me get to a better mental state so I can still move forward based on what I can control and then still try to influence the bigger picture to help. And that's why in corporate America, I'm always drawn to working on cultural initiatives
Yes.
where if the company's trying to improve the culture, I'm signing up for it because I
Yeah.
want to be a part of that.
And also, that makes sense of your choice about going into a change management role because that's where that happens, right? And
Exactly.
you have the two extremes, don't you? You have the regression into very negative behaviors, but you also have the possibility of developing new, much more positive behaviors. And what's it like in the US in terms of this idea now of creating a much more supportive workplace? I mean, it's a very different environment anyway. So workers' rights are very different, but are you finding it fertile ground for what you're saying? Obviously, you're getting a new job, so somebody believes in it, but would you say it is being picked up by people understanding the role of relationship and support?
It's company by company.
Is it?
There are definitely macro trends, as you mentioned previously, about the relationship of senior leadership and the rest of the company. So you'll see a big push for productivity, working long hours as if it's a badge of honor. So, to give you a couple anecdotes, that you've heard in the news, where Elon Musk will say it's a superpower to work throughout the weekend.
No.
It's they bring in cots into a conference room so you can literally sleep at your job,
Mm.
and then wake up early in the morning and go right at it, sleep, work, sleep. Hope the people doing that do not have families,
Yeah.
because what a disservice you're doing to your family and
Also,
yourself.
productivity tanks when you do that to people. It's just ridiculous. The evidence is quite clear.
Yeah, and I was looking at a study the other day that I think it said once you exceed 52 hours, then your executive function declines, your emotional stability
Absolutely.
declines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another study showed that a recent one from Mercer that 82% of all workers are at risk of burnout. the vast, vast majority of people are struggling because of economic uncertainty,
Yeah,
because of overwork, sheer exhaustion, social media, strife happening, throughout their location in the world. That's a crisis.
yeah,
But you have a counterforce of companies driving profits, having to achieve those Wall Street expectations every quarter.
yeah,
So workers are being expected to work harder and harder and have less and less job security. So you don't even have the job security if you hit the ball out of the park.
yeah.
That's reality. And the book I wrote and just what I'm trying to do in my own life and when I, join the company, I'll try my best based on what I can control to help remedy that to the best of my ability. But there's a lot of competing forces there.
Yeah. So there are some themes that you're sort of bringing on. So first of all, let's just name the book. It's called How to Be Okay, right?
Oh no, my book is The Wellness Ethic.
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Okay.
How to thrive in an unpredictable world
How to thrive
where
in.
stupid things can happen.
Yeah,
There's a lot of humor in the book.
that's quite it's quite a long title going on there. So
Yeah.
tell us about then. You are sort of in this place where you've discovered that the coaching that you want to formalize what you understand as being supportive and helpful towards people. And so you decide that you're going to take a sabbatical, which is quite a courageous thing to do in the US, full stop, to write the book. Where did you start with that? Where did you sort of decide to start, and what are the sort of key principles that you began to encode in the book or wanted to communicate to people?
Yeah, the way it started after I had sold my social media company as a side hustle, and I was thinking, what is next? I took stock of my life and I realized, again, same old story. I think I've done a lot in my life, not perfect, but I've done a lot. I have a lot to be grateful for, but I'm not feeling it.
Yeah,
I'm not as happy as I should be. Even though I went through all that life coaching training, made great strides, I'm not anywhere close to where I need to be.
yeah,
So my epiphany was, why not write a book and unlock the secrets to wellness and
yeah.
apply it to my own life and close that gaping hole between inspired living and the way my life was. And I thought, if I can do that, I can help others do the same.
And you
So
talk
that
about the wellness ethic, is that right?
exactly. So it was going to unlock those secrets. And then I thought, by going through that process, not only will I have a lot of growth, I'll apply the lessons to my life, but I'll have a wonderful legacy for my children.
Yeah,
Even if the book sells 10 copies, they're going to have that for the rest of their lives. Long after I'm gone, they can tap into that wisdom. So there was so much upside to the book that I just had to do it.
yeah,
So once I stared at that blank page, the first page, and started to write, I did a lot of research in parallel to get my arms around what is wellness and how can my mission was to make wellness accessible and actionable. I wanted a very action-oriented book,
yeah.
not some theoretical treatise on, esoteric concepts that you read, okay, about, and then you move on with your life. Real tangible things that you can put into action and adopt. So I started with applying what is called the 80-20 rule, the
Yeah.
Pareto principle. And the basic concept is that 80% of the impact of anything can be achieved by focusing on the vital few 20%, just the powerful concepts that give you the most bang for the buck. So I took each topic around wellness. So that would be mind, body, spirit, relationships,
Yeah.
personal and professional pursuits, and then the last one was lifestyle maintenance.
Yeah.
Um, and I took each of those topics, applied the 80-20 rule, and tried to get down to the essence of what is most tangible, most pragmatic in that area that you can incorporate into your life to make your life better.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
certainly
doable.
psychological research backs that up, doesn't it? It's the smallest amount of effort for the biggest sort of
without it.
yeah,
And it's also a key to adopting change. If
yeah.
you make it too complicated, too much all at once, it usually falls by the wayside.
Okay. But it's interesting that you chose this idea of thinking about trying to put wellness front and center because I think a lot of people, and I totally agree with you, I think that's the way to do it. But a lot of people think that it's about, I've got to solve my illness or I've got to solve my problem and then I'll be okay. When did you get that insight that that's not really the way to go? Because that's the sort of rabbit hole that people go down. And that's where you get diagnoses and pills and potions and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
And that's where you get this huge health business that sort of seems to make people ill, and we don't notice that. Do you know what I
Ironically.
mean? It's like it's strange, but where when do you think it clicked with you that actually no, the approach needs to be what makes me well, and then how do I encode that and how do I achieve it?
Really, two reasons.
Yeah,
First, practically speaking, I couldn't go down 50 rabbit holes to try to customize a book for every person for their individual challenge.
yeah, that makes absolute
Wouldn't
sense.
be effective. But the primary reason is, and there's a lot of research around this as well, that your wellness is not driven by just one factor. Now,
Mhm.
you may have an illness that does, take over your life, and you have to deal with that, with doctors or psychiatrists or whatever it may be. Um, but generally speaking, if you take a holistic wellness approach where you are focusing on mind, body, and spirit. You're reducing stress. You're eating well.
Yeah,
You're exercising. You have healthy relationships, loving relationships. All of those factors, individually and collectively, have an impact on your well-being, on your health, your mental health, your
yeah.
physical health, everything, your life satisfaction. It's a magic formula when you achieve some level of harmony. It's never perfect, but you achieve some level of harmony in those areas. That's how you thrive. So it really is an all-in approach.
And it's interesting because I don't know if you come across lifestyle medicine, which is an evidence-based medical approach that just reflects what you're saying. So there's a lot of evidence now to back that up. And if you look at places, there's these places called blue zones around the world, um,
Right.
where there are concentrations of people who live the longest. Italy has some, etc. And then they've studied those blue zones, and all the things that you're talking about are literally what people do. The relationship things. So, particularly for a guy, particularly for a corporate guy, who survived the corporate world very successfully. So, pat on the back for you. Well done.
Thank
Um,
you.
when did it? I mean, I'm sure it was always important to you to have relationships, but inevitably the stresses and strains of earning money and all that sort of stuff. When did you understand? I guess, did you have an epiphany where you went, no, I really have to invest in my family. This is has to come front and center for my health and well-being. Otherwise, I can't be this productive guy at work and all that sort of stuff. Is that what happened to you?
No, there was no epiphany. Um, it was natural. So what I found was, when I met my future wife and we ended up getting married and had children, it was within me to be drawn to spend time with them. I would look at my children and love surrounded all of it, that,
Yeah.
infused everything. But I would look at my children and think, my God, they're young. They are relying on my wife and I to help them grow into healthy, responsible, caring, and loving children. They have the world at their feet. They have unlimited capability. They can go after their dreams. And we can be such a key enabler and supporter of that and to help them get there. And I get goosebumps just thinking about it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I could not possibly say no to that. And if work got so busy, which it does, And there are some weekends where you just have to say, I've got to work extra hours and that's life. Um, that has to be the exception.
Yeah. If
Um,
it becomes the
so
norm, it's a problem, right?
yeah, so it's um, that drive, that love and compassion, and understanding your role where you're just drawn to support them and love them. And it's the same thing with my wife. Like, how could I not look at her and think, what can I possibly do to make her life
Yeah.
better? So she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom very early on. That's going to wreak havoc on our finances. Um, but if we can possibly do it,
Let's
how
do.
can we say no to that?
Yeah.
So that it was driven from from love, and it was natural.
Yeah. And that, I guess, was something that was you were brought up in terms of your own family and childhood, etc. That was modeled for you.
Without a doubt, and that helps. Having a stable childhood, you are able to model that, and then you think, all right, I've learned a lot from that experience, and what else can I do to maybe even take it further? And that's what you strive for, just being the best parent you can be.
I mean, I do find it interesting. A lot of the conversations I'm having at the moment with men like yourself and other people, it's almost like if we'd have gone back in time to those free range days and talked to our grandparents, they'd be telling us this, wouldn't they? They'd be saying, put your family first, put your health and well-being first. That's your real wealth, is all of that stuff. And we seem to be coming back to that, if you like, homespun truths that people did know and held on to. And again, I think about because you've mentioned, say, Mr. Musk, for example, who is reportedly has a whole tribe of children that he never sees. Um,
Yeah.
now that's not a healthy person. That's definitely not. Sorry about this. For some reason, my camera picks up certain hand movements. It's just picked up the thumb. I don't know why. Some weird AI thing happens. But I would say, from that's not a healthy person. That's not a successful person. If you've got something like 10 or 15 children that you never see, that's a sign of distress. That's a sign of a problem, I would say.
Yeah, and that you can go down a rabbit hole there without a doubt. What I would confidently say is um, those are values that have gone astray.
Right.
And I would even argue that I don't want to get inside Elon Musk's head,
No, let's
but
not.
but I would argue that he would be happier and more fulfilled if he did establish those connections in his relationships, the loving relationships, and maybe more compassion for the companies he leads and the influence he has on global um, factors, economics, wealth, climate. You go down the list. He wields a lot of influence, politics, and he would be happier and more fulfilled. But he would also create a whole lot more love in the world for others. And to me, the meaning of life, and this was one of the epiphanies for me in writing the book. And maybe it's obvious to other people, but I define the meaning of life as to feel and share love.
Yeah.
Everything you do is centered around that, not just for yourself. You want
Yeah.
to feel love, but you want to share that love with others. And if everyone took that approach, the world would transform.
And there's a lot of health benefits from that because we're herd animals. And when we contribute to the herd in that way, when we make the herd safer, we're
Yes.
making ourselves safer. It's just a biological fact. And we get loads of reward hormones for it. So there's no doubt that that's true. It's also, I think, is the antidote to many of our current problems, without a doubt. If that we reassert our common need for each other.
Oh, undoubtedly. And one of the concepts I also write about is something simple: lead with love.
Yes.
Whatever is going on in your life, whether it's business, personal, if
Yeah.
you're in a line at the airport because you have to get your flight rescheduled. You have a choice. Do you want to lead with love
Yeah.
or not? You can be nice to those around you. You can be nice to the attendant who's going to help you reschedule, or you can choose to be bitter, angry. Your stress levels rise. You can take it out on others. When you get to that beleaguered airline representative, you can take it out on him or her
Yes, that's right.
and ruin their day. And the thing is, you would not have gotten your flight rescheduled faster. You're still
No,
going to get to the destination at the same time, but you just created a whole lot of negative energy. You have a
there's a little
choice.
trick I give to some of my patients who are struggling with depression and anxiety, and it's to show kindness to somebody who you can't possibly get anything back from. So
Exactly.
it's sort of like, and you start to introduce that type of stuff into your life, and so it's not transactional. The example I give is, for example, people who use public transit, which is not a concept you know about in America.
Yep.
Like, but there's two doors usually on a bus, the one you go on and pay, and then the one you leave by. And a simple act of kindness is to make sure that when you leave the bus, you say, look at the driver and say, thank you. And there's no way that driver's ever going to be able to do anything for you. But it is remarkable how small actions like that are incredibly powerful. And also in terms of relationships, they often talk in relationship therapy about the act of turning towards your partner over small things. So your partner notices a pretty flower in the garden. You go, oh yes, there's a pretty flower in the garden. And you don't have to turn that into a big deal, but it's those small, supportive human gestures have an extraordinary impact upon our own health and well-being. And even in when we're laying somebody off, to understand the compassion and the humanity of that is really important. And not to send the frigging email. I wish people had more courage and would just sort of, do it as human beings. Like, this is the way it is. This is reality, right? You know,
Yeah, and when you look at a layoff, if you lead people, there is so much you can do well in advance, just how you led that
yeah,
person to help them grow, make an impact.
yeah,
And then if it does come down to a layoff, you can show compassion. You can be
yeah,
positive around their contribution to help them maintain their dignity and self-respect. You
yeah.
can offer to be a reference. You can make calls to people you know on their behalf. There's so much you can do to help that transition as best as you can,
Yeah.
but so many are taking shortcuts and not doing those.
Yeah, and it's pretty
Unfortunate.
shoddy and it's pretty cowardly, to be honest. I think
It
it's
is.
cowardly and unprofessional. One of the things we're going to have to finish, but one of the things I do like about your book very much is the cover, which you've got the image. Is that a Matisse
It
image?
is. Yes.
It looks like Matisse. It's these dancers dancing around a world, or some sort of globe. Like they're dancing on the earth and around a globe, a blue
Yes.
globe. It's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Um, was there a reason for Matisse? I can tell you something about Matisse in a moment, but
Yeah, it was an interesting process designing that cover. I
oh
worked
yeah,
with a professional, we partnered on it, and I had the idea of having the work ethic on the cover crossed off, then underneath in big bold letters, the wellness ethic.
no,
And then I challenged the designer, let's come up with a graphic that kind of pulls things together. So what he did that was brilliant is he looked at the introduction to my book, and the opening sentence talks about your mind, body, and spirit as a dance troupe in rhythm with
yeah,
the flow of life or something like that. And so those dancing figures represent mind, body, and spirit. And when
it's
they're in sync, you thrive. So
yeah.
he really came up with a beautiful variation of the Matisse image.
I mean, Matisse is, as an artist, is very interesting. I don't know what you know about him, but I saw an exhibition of his here in London, a place called the Tate Modern, and I walked into one of the rooms, and Matisse was very famous for being able to evoke emotional responses. which you
Right.
don't get when you just see a print. It's the truth. If you go and see the original stuff, you do. I walked into one of the rooms and I started crying, and I was like, what on earth is going on?
Yeah.
Like, I was in floods of tears. And then I read the thing on the wall about what that room was dedicated to, and it was all the final bits of art he did before he died, when he knew he was going to die. And so he had evoked that loss and death and moving on and end of life perfectly. And that sense of being able to get in touch in that way, I think, is crucial to health and well-being. To be able
Yeah.
to
And
do
one
that.
thing I would add, because you spurred the thought
Yeah.
about seeing a painting in person. I in the book I talk about this concept called Mona Lisa moments.
Wow.
And what that, yeah, and what it was about is mindfulness. But it was when I saw the Mona Lisa in person, and
Yes.
I went there and I was expecting it to be almost a tourist trap. You
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
it, you
Yeah.
take the
Yeah. Yeah.
selfie,
Yeah.
and then you move
What's
on
the
with your
big
day.
deal? Yeah.
But my God,
It
oh,
is.
that it is so beautiful, mesmerizing, and you just get drawn in. And I just stood there until they almost had to physically remove me and say, Mark, there are other people who would like to see this painting,
Yeah.
because it just drew me in. And to think that, Da Vinci painted this, had this vision, and created this stunning work of art. So the Mona Lisa moment is a reminder that every day of your life, you've got at least a dozen opportunities to fully engage in the moment and appreciate the beauty in nature,
Yeah.
or a painting or a print in your house, and just notice the detail and get drawn in and lose your mind, forget about everything else happening, and just focus on the moment. And if you do that, mindfulness is a superpower. It
Yeah.
can really help
Yeah.
reduce
Yeah.
stress, boost happiness. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I
Notice,
had to
smell the
share that.
roses, as we say. Smell the roses. That's what we say.
Exactly.
So, the Wellness Ethic is the book. You have a website as well, thewellnessethic.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just wellnessethic.com,
Yeah.
and that will give you a whole bunch of information and tools on all things wellness, videos, and you can go to Amazon to buy the book, or other online book retailers. So it's
Yeah.
all over the place wherever you buy books.
And you've got also lots of social media on X, you're at Wellness Ethic, Instagram Wellness, on LinkedIn, you're yourself, right?
Right.
You're on TikTok. That's interesting. I'm thinking about getting on TikTok myself. Well done,
Yeah.
Lee, for managing that.
Not me.
Yeah.
My daughter,
Is
um,
it?
much more savvy, and my youngest daughter was one of the editors of my book, and I gave her that credit as an editor, along with
Right,
professional editors that I hired,
right.
because she really immersed herself
How
in.
much does she charge for a TikTok account? I might bring her on, mate.
Yeah, probably a lot, because she's a full-time nurse. So
Yeah,
she's
right.
in this field, so she's a dynamic person along with my other daughter. But yeah,
Right.
so it's a family affair, and that's one of the techniques when you're taking on a big challenge like writing a book. Involve the family, and
But
it
also,
makes it
I
that much
imagine
better.
they're super happy that dad and hubby is on this type of trying to make the world a better place gig. Because,
Oh,
yeah,
without a doubt, and I'm thrilled that they were so heavily involved, my wife, my two children, reading every chapter before anyone else, and reading each chapter probably 4 or 5 times before it was published. So they're a very big part of this book,
yeah.
and I
It's
wouldn't have
it's
it any
it's
other
a
way.
great endeavor. We do have to finish, but I want to finish on this. It's nice to have a book written by a successful guy about wellness, because we just don't need another productivity book. There's enough of them.
I'm with you.
We don't need any more. Okay. What we need is a kind of better, more connected world, without a doubt.
I
And then
agree.
the productivity comes from that, without a doubt, as well.
Yeah,
So really good to have you on, Mark. You stay there. So, folks, I hope you've really got as much from that as I have. It's nice to see this type of work being done. It's very hopeful in these times when it does seem quite dark and dangerous. That no, actually, there's a lot of people doing great stuff. And giving a platform to that is really important. So I'll see you all next week at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a great week. So bye bye for now.